Hi everybody, I hope you're all having a good day. My name is Kanuhuiko and welcome to another episode of Let's Dumbify Blender. It has been a while since the last episode, but to quickly recap, in the last episode I was teaching you guys a bit more about the edit mode and just a couple of shortcuts just to get you started on, kind of discovering the different shortcuts that are available when it comes to modeling for beginners. But I will say, from that last episode, there was definitely, I will say this right now, there was definitely a couple of extra stuff that I was saying that wasn't really necessary. There was a couple of shortcuts that were quite unnecessary, but even then, were still useful at the same time. But I will say that, I will be starting, after this episode here, I will be doing more explanation about like actual modeling. So basically I'm going to start more guides on the Let's Dumbify Blender where I will be showing you guys more on modeling specific stuff. So basically, for example, we're going to model like a basic t-shirt, a basic pants, or just other specific outfits either upon request or just outfits that I was making that I should teach you guys about. So yeah, but other than that, a little quick note there. Today I'll be showing you guys more about the different tabs right here of Blender. Now I will not be going over the shading tab, animation tab, rendering tab, compositing tab, or the scripting tab, because we're mainly on the first part of the series. I'm only going to focus more on the modeling aspect of Blender, which is the modeling tab, sculpting tab, UV editing tab, texture paint, and pretty much just your basic layout. Which the basic layout, which I'll get started right now, this is literally just the default layout of Blender. Like, this is literally like your generic layout, everything's there for you, and just all that stuff. Just generic. Everything's already here for you. You have your timeline at the bottom, your tabs over here, just all that. That's basically what the layout tab is. It's just like a base layout for you to get working on your projects. But there is a good reason for all these other tabs here, and it's because they have a base setup which helps keep your workspace very organized so you don't get overwhelmed as much when you are modeling. So, let's actually start off with showing you guys about the modeling tab. So on the modeling tab, right here, we are on edit mode, but the thing about it is that it has removed the timeline at the bottom and it directs us to the modifier tab. And this is because when we model, sometimes we will be using some modifiers. Now, this does look quite a lot, and I know this looks very tedious, but I will tell you, you're probably going to need about 3 to 5 of these. Ish, sorta. It really depends, which I will explain eventually on modifiers, but you're not gonna need all of this. Some of these are more like Blender specific, because I know for a fact there are some people who are trying to learn about modeling when it comes for basically use such as VR chat models and also Vtuber models, like the VRM format, like this VRM model that I have right here myself. There's a couple of these that will not work well with those type of setups. Like I said, you don't need everything in Blender. You only need a couple stuff. But yeah, so as I said, I taught you already about the simple shortcuts, right here, like the G key, you can move around and all that. Which I highly recommend. If you have not learned about shortcuts in Blender, I highly recommend checking out my video. There should be a little pop-up message on the top that should direct you to the tutorial about shortcuts in Blender. So yeah, please check that out if you're brand new. But let's move on. This is pretty basic. There's also the sculpting tab, which I personally use on my models to kind of help fine-tune the shape of my models. That way it makes modeling much more easier and faster. I'm not going to explain entirely on like the full-blown usage of sculpting, not until the modeling parts come in where I actually show you about modeling specific clothing and all that. But I will say, I personally use only 2 of these brushes, but I still use a couple of them, like these other brushes here. But I mainly use the draw. I mainly use this one here. I also mainly use the smooth one as well to help smooth out my meshes. And also sometimes I would also use the draw sharp. Sometimes. But I mainly just use these 2 mostly. This one's kind of like a side sword thing. But you can use, like, there's a lot of other stuff that you can also use. I sometimes use pinch as well. Sometimes. And also grab is a pretty good one too. This is really useful. I highly recommend checking this one out too. But yeah, other than that, you can mess around with these tools right here. They're pretty fun to mess around with. But yeah. And also I kinda, this draw thing, I actually call it the inflate sculpt brush. It's called draw, but I mainly just call it inflate because of how I use it. But yeah. But besides that though, you can also access your settings on the right side, which is, the settings are behind me. You can mess around with the settings. If you don't like the default, you can mess with the radius and the strength and all that. The strength helps kind of like lighten up the amount that you get from the brush. So yeah. Other than that, we can move on to the UV editing tab. Here, this is basically to kind of dumbify what UV mapping or what UV editing is. I want you to think of a soda can. Think of a soda can right now, and I want you to imagine yourself holding a sticker, and then you slap that sticker on the soda can. That's basically what UV mapping is. You're basically putting an image on an object. So if you can see with my outfit, there is some snowflakes on it. I basically use UV editing in order to help map the image, which is a bunch of snowflakes. I map the image of snowflakes onto my bathing suit. So yeah, that's basically what this is. And you will be needing this a lot, especially you know, if you have like specific designs on your outfit, or even, it's not just outfits, but maybe if you want some realistic like hair details on your model, you'll definitely need to texture it out. You might also want to put some realistic skin details on your model's skin, or maybe if you have like a little animal, model, you can also kind of like put some fake fur details on it. All that cool stuff. I'll be going more in depth on UV editing when I start the modeling part of Let's Dumbify Blenders, but until then, that's kind of what I wanted to explain. We have in edit mode, this is basically, in edit mode you'll be starting your mapping, kind of like marking your seams, which is basically just marking areas of kind of like sections of the UV map, and then you'll eventually create a map which will be projected on the left side. I'll show you an example actually. So we're gonna quickly do Control R, and I'm going to left click and then right click to create that loop cut. I'm going to go into the small UV tab up here, click on Mark Seam, and you'll see this red line right here. And then I'm going to press A, and also you can see right here, there is a UV map right there, but also I can click on Unwrap, and you can see that the UV map has changed, and you can put an image there, and you can mess around with these points so you can get a more specific shape of the texture on the mesh. It really depends on what you're going for, but you can play around with this and all that. 3D is all about experimenting. It's really fun, but it can also be tedious. But yeah, there's also a texture paint tab. This to actually simplify this for you, I'm gonna assume you know what Void Studio is, and if you don't know what Void Studio is, I will actually have a link to the program in the description. But basically, Void Studio is just a character creation program to kind of like dumbify like the entire process of modeling and just simplify everything, just so you can have your own character. I'm not gonna go in depth like on like the pros and cons of Void and just all that other stuff, but basically there's an option where you can paint on the character, and basically this is what it is. So let me demonstrate real quickly. So I'm gonna go click on new, just a new image here. I'm going to go into the materials tab behind me. I'm going to go click on the yellow circle on the base color, add a texture, image texture, and then I'm just going to click on the image dropout and then click on the unnamed texture, and then I'm just going to click and drag, and there you go. You just draw. I also use this myself, especially when I sketch out some designs on my outfits. I also use this on my sandals on my model that you see here, but I'm not going to show you my sandals. That's dumb. But yeah, there you go. You can see that you can easily kind of like paint this and all that, and it's pretty cool. Very, very cool. Just click and drag. Have fun. Like, you can even use a drawing tablet on Blender if you really want to. That's a fun fact. But yeah. And other than that, I would say one thing that they could have added. They could have added a tab for weight painting, because I know weight painting is a big pain. So I feel like maybe a setup for weight painting would actually be convenient, but you can always create your own setup by just clicking on the plus button and just adding it. In fact, actually, there's still some more like presets you can check out, especially for like video editing, some sculpting, and just all that other stuff. All the setups are here, but you can always create your own if you want. You can add Workspace and just all that stuff, or duplicate current if you even want to. But yeah. But other than that, there is also the weight paint tab. I'm not sure if I have discussed this. I'm pretty sure I didn't. But you can just click on your model and then you could just click on weight paint. And like I said, even though there is no tab for it, weight paint itself, it's like I said, the layout tab. The good thing about Blender is that at least they still kept it quite simple. They changed the tools to the ones that you would need. But yeah, you can just weight paint like that, sorta. Not really. Don't you ever do what I'm doing right now. This is me just doing whatever. This is kind of like weight paint in a nutshell, but not really. Please don't reenact what Conda does with the cube. You're probably gonna kill your model like that. There's a smarter way to do weight paint. Don't reenact Conda sometimes. But yeah, now we are gonna go into the other tabs that we will be discussing. Alright, so now we are going to talk about the other tabs, which is right here, the side tabs right here. Now, I will say, most of the time, a lot of these you're also not gonna need. For example, the particle properties, you're not gonna need this as much. Same with the, same thing with the physical properties and also the object constraints properties as well. A lot of these you would not need. But I will say the most important ones would definitely be your materials tab, the object data tab, and of course it is not shown here, but let me do Shift A. Let me click over to armature, just click on single bone. And just click the armature on the hierarchy. In fact, if you zoom into the cube, you can see the little bone here. That's a bone, by the way. But there's also the bones tab that would pop up. Really depends on what you click on in your 3D view. Some other tabs will start popping up. So there's some bone properties as well. And just all this other stuff here. But there's a couple, like I said, there's a couple tabs you won't be needing, but I'll only explain the tabs that you would need most of all. So let's get started. So if you are planning on doing some rendering, mainly in Blender, like you wanted to make some pictures, like I personally, when I make my thumbnails, I use Blender a lot with my thumbnails. And I basically kind of like mess with these settings. Sometimes I add ambient occlusion, sometimes I add a bloom, or even some motion blur if I'm rendering out an animation and stuff. Kind of like mess around with this if you are interested in like doing some rendering with Blender. But if you don't plan on doing any rendering with Blender at all, then please ignore this. There's also the, once again, this has to do with rendering in Blender with images or videos. Like I said, if you're only doing Blender just for VR chat models and Vtuber models only, I would not touch this. I would ignore this. But if you are interested, then yeah, if you do want to do rendering in Blender, you can mess around with the settings. You can choose your format you want. I mainly choose PNG when it comes to rendering images, and then I would choose FFmpeg video when I make my animations. And I always keep my resolution to HD, but if I have to make images for specific stuff, such as my profile picture, I would change the resolution to something like 1024 by 1024. So yeah. There's also this one, which is not really needed. There's a scene tab, which I sometimes need. This is usually good if you're doing like Source Filmmaker model conversions. If you have the Source Blender tools, which I do not have in this computer yet. But if I have it, it would pop up here. There's also the World tab if you want to load some background images and other stuff if you are interested with rendering in Blender. Here there's the object data, so if I were to click on the cube, it will display the name and kind of like the placement. So if I click and drag the X, you can see it's moving. So yeah, this kind of just gives some extra information about the object itself. You don't really need to worry about this, but there's some stuff that you can also mess around with, such as viewport display, like if you want to see the wireframe of the model and all of that. But as I said, not that important either. There's also the modifier tab, which is also, this is actually important. This is very important when you're modeling stuff. So let's say I have the cube. I'm gonna press the G key and I'm gonna move over here. But let's say I want to make a duplicate, sort of like you want to mirror something. Well, you can click on add modifier and click on mirror, and if you change the settings and stuff, you can actually hold on, actually Alt G, edit mode, GX, actually GY, there you go, there you go. It doesn't mirror modifier doesn't do it based on the object mode, it mainly focuses on edit mode. But there you go, just like that. But yeah, you could do some mirroring and all of that. You can mess around with that. You can also mess around with subdivision if you want. You can turn that cube into a sphere, a weird looking sphere. Like, you could do that cool stuff. So yeah, very important with modeling. You could make some cool shapes with this. And as I said, you don't need to learn about the particles. We're not going to go over that. We don't need to know about object constraints either. For this one, this is basically where your weight paint data and your shape keys will be stored. So if you were to, let me show you real quickly. So I click on this sphere, shift select the bone, control P, automatic weights, let's say that for example. And I click on the object and I go back to object data. There you go. There's the vertex group right there, which will store your weight paint data. So if you go to weight paint mode, you would see that's 100% weight painted. So yeah, simple stuff like that. So if you're ever wondering how to weight paint properly, like you want to know about weight painting, that's kind of in a nutshell. I'll explain more in depth on it so that way you can better understand, because you're probably confused on what I just said. But I will explain in more in depth on how weight painting works. Like I said, I'm only just skimming through this sorta. You can also add shape keys as well. So I can click this, hit edit, scale the crud out of this, and then just like literally press key, edit, do your stuff, get out of edit mode, and just drag the value bar like this. That's literally it. It looks very funny. But yeah. And then you have the materials tab, which if you want to add a look, so if you go to like material preview, I will say, make sure, actually this is a big warning by the way. This is for like those who have like an AMD GPU. There is a bug with Blender for AMD cards, so I highly recommend, if you're an AMD GPU user, please make sure you have Blender 2.90.1 and make sure that you enable high quality normals, that way you can see your stuff properly. I hope that helps. If you're NVIDIA card, you're fine, but if you're AMD GPU, please make sure to do that. It's very important. Otherwise, you're just gonna see some ugly stuff with Blender. Just until they have an update to fix AMD stuff, so yeah. Other than that, you have that. There's also the texture tab right here. I myself personally don't even touch this at all. I mainly just edit my stuff in GIMP, and then I just put it on the materials, and that's it. I used to use it back with 2.79, but not anymore. So yeah, it's quite useless unless you're doing specific stuff, but yeah. Other than that though, that kind of covers the gist of it. Like I said, there's also the armature stuff, which you don't really need to touch too much. It's all mainly with edit mode. But if you do want to rename your bone, then definitely you would basically have to go to the bone properties and rename it here, or you could just go to your hierarchy and just double click on it and rename it. So yeah, that's pretty much it for the tabs of Blender. There's also this tab here with the workbench, but there's hardly anything, which I'm not gonna go over. But yeah, other than that, if you have watched all of my episodes so far, you would kind of basically have like a gist of how Blender works. Now, I'm not saying you're going to be a full-blown professional at this point. No. We have to practice. So that's why I'm going to be teaching you guys about modeling specific stuff, so that way we can better understand Blender a lot better. But that was the following episodes I just posted. They're mainly just to give you a bit of a taste on kind of like what you're going to be experiencing when you start modeling on your own. But in the next tutorial, I will be teaching you guys about how to model a shirt for a female avatar. And I will be downloading a Void model for the demonstration, so that way it can better suit a majority of people. So I'll be showing you how to do that, and eventually we will go from there and do some other cool stuff with it. And if you have any other suggestions on what I can teach you guys when it comes to modeling specific objects, please let me know. If you have any other questions about Blender, please let me know. I will gladly answer, or I can also make a tutorial, or both. But other than that though, that's pretty much all I have to teach you guys in this tutorial. I hope I helped you out. I'll see you guys next time when we actually start modeling a shirt in Blender. Heika, sayonara everyone, and make sure to click on the subscribe button if you want to also not only promote the channel, but also if you want to keep updates with more tutorials that I post on a weekly basis. See you guys, bye bye!